Today, I will tell you a story that began on the day my only son got married. A day that should have been filled with joy and family. Instead, I was placed in a seat hidden behind a massive column, far from the center of light and laughter. They thought no one would notice, and perhaps most people didn't. But I noticed. And I remember every detail. When my son got married, I never mentioned the $78 million fortune my late husband had left me. Thank heavens I kept quiet, for silence in that moment was my shield. If you find yourself drawn into stories of quiet dignity, betrayal, and the justice that follows, please like this story, subscribe, and share your thoughts. Welcome to Grandma Life Stories, where lessons of family and strength are told with every word. My name is Margaret Collins. I am 71 years old and a widow. My husband Daniel passed away nearly 4 years ago. He was not a man who boasted. He believed wealth was safest when hidden, and dignity was strongest when carried quietly. He left me a fortune, more than most could imagine, but he also left me his wisdom. I live simply, modestly, in our home in Princeton. To most people, I am just another widow with thinning silver hair and careful steps. That is how Daniel wanted it. That is how I chose to live. The wedding took place in a grand ballroom in New Jersey. Chandeliers sparkled like frozen waterfalls above the guests. Violins played softly from a corner, and roses filled the air with their fragrance. Women wore gowns that shimmered under the lights, and men stood tall in pressed suits. It was a scene pulled from a magazine, polished and perfect on the surface. I entered quietly, wearing a navy dress I had sewn myself to fit my frame, paired with a simple strand of pearls that once belonged to my grandmother. The pearls had seen wars, births, funerals, and now this wedding. They were not extravagant, but they were mine. I thought they would honor the occasion. Yet when I looked at the tables, at the names scribbled in cursive on the place cards, my heart sank. Table 16. Behind a towering floral arrangement so thick it could have hidden a small child. I could hardly see the stage. From where I sat, I could catch only slivers of the ceremony reflected in the ballroom mirrors. A mother, hidden from her son's day of joy. I folded my hands, steady and composed, though inside, a part of me tightened. Andrew, my son, looked radiant in his tuxedo. When he walked down the aisle with Natalie, the guests sighed with admiration. Natalie was beautiful, graceful, glowing in her lace gown. She carried herself like a queen ascending her throne. The Brooks family, her family, surrounded her with pride, each one dressed impeccably, their smiles wide and deliberate. From my seat, I could see it all. The glances, the whispers, the way the Brooks family moved as though this union was more than love, it was conquest. Their gestures told a story without words. They had gained Andrew, and through him they thought they had gained something else. Gregory Brooks, Natalie's father, held himself like a man who owned the room. His smile was polite, but sharp at the edges. He moved with purpose, shaking hands, greeting guests, making sure every eye knew who he was. When his gaze swept over me, his expression barely flickered, but I felt the weight of it. He looked through me, not at me. To him, I was not part of the picture he wanted painted. Natalie, radiant under the spotlight, glanced my way as well. Her lips curved into a polite smile that never reached her eyes. There was no warmth, no welcome, only calculation. The way she leaned into Andrew, the way she laughed just a bit too loudly, it was clear she was performing for the crowd. And Andrew, my Andrew. He laughed nervously, looking from one face to another, his posture straighter when Natalie touched his arm, when Gregory patted his back. I searched for his eyes, but whenever mine found his, he quickly looked away. My heart ached, not from anger, but from the realization that my son was already caught in a current stronger than himself. The violinists played, glasses clinked, and the guests clapped on cue. Yet beneath the glitter, I felt something colder, a current I had felt before in classrooms filled with children who bullied quietly, who smiled while wounding. I recognized it instantly. The Brooks family were not celebrating. They were claiming territory. And Andrew, my son, was the prize they had dressed up as love. As the ceremony ended and the applause rang out, I remained still, my hands folded, my heart calm. I whispered only to myself, "Let them believe I am small. Let them think I am powerless. They will reveal themselves in time." In the mirror across the room, I caught my own reflection. A silver-haired woman, lines etched deep around her eyes, pearls glinting softly against navy blue. They thought I was invisible, but I knew who I was. I knew what Daniel had left me, and I knew why I had chosen silence. The night stretched on, full of music, laughter, and the careful choreography of appearances. I stayed in my corner, observing, remembering, and waiting. My silence, though they mistook it for weakness, was my strength. And as I left the ballroom, unnoticed by nearly everyone, one thought echoed in my mind. The real story had not yet begun. The music was still playing when I rose from my seat to greet the bride and her family. Guests surrounded the couple, offering congratulations and polite laughter. I moved through the crowd slowly, steady in my steps. When I reached Natalie, she looked down at me with a smile that cut sharper than glass. "At least you made it on time," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We are so lucky you could join us today." There was no mistaking her meaning. To everyone else, it sounded harmless, but the way she tilted her chin, the gleam in her eyes, it was a strike delivered in public. She wanted me small. She wanted me humiliated in front of strangers. My lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but into a calm acceptance of what she had just revealed about herself. Before I could speak, Gregory Brooks extended his hand. Tall, broad, his presence carried the confidence of a man used to dominance. I placed my hand in his. The squeeze that followed was deliberate. It was not a greeting. It was a test. His grip pressed hard into my knuckles, forcing pain into my bones. He leaned closer so only I could hear. "Andrew is fortunate," he murmured. "Finally, he has a family that can give him a solid foundation, a real support system." The words were smooth, but the implication was jagged. A support system I apparently could never provide. A deliberate dismissal of everything I had done, raising my son alone after Daniel's passing. To him, I was already irrelevant. I inhaled slowly, keeping my gaze level. The ballroom was buzzing with joy, but our small circle was silent, tense. His eyes challenged me, expecting me to flinch or pull away. Instead, I let his grip hold me, then answered with a voice low but sharp. "True support," I said, "does not need to be displayed for the world to see. It speaks for itself." The words hung between us like a blade. His smile faltered just slightly before he released my hand. Natalie's lips pressed tighter, her smile no longer warm enough to convince anyone watching. She had expected me to crumble. Instead, I had answered without raising my voice, without breaking my calm. Andrew appeared beside us, laughter forced into his tone. "Mother, isn't the ceremony beautiful?" he asked, eyes darting nervously between me and his new in-laws. His hands fidgeted at his sides. He knew the tension, but he lacked the courage to name it. "Yes, Andrew," I replied, steady as stone. "It is a day you will always remember." I let the weight of that sentence linger. He shifted, uncomfortable, before Natalie slipped her arm through his. She turned to him, ignoring me entirely. "Your mother is tired. She must sit again," she said, as though I were an elderly relic who could not speak for herself. I did not move. "I am not tired," I answered clearly. "I can stand as long as I choose." Her eyes flicked to Gregory, searching for support. He placed a hand on Andrew's shoulder, steering him back toward the crowd. "Come, son," Gregory said. "There are important guests you need to meet." Important guests, as if I, his mother, did not qualify. They pulled him away, leaving me standing in the corner of their celebration. The orchestra swelled, couples danced, waiters passed champagne. To everyone else, the night remained perfect. But I knew better. I stepped aside, watching as Natalie paraded Andrew across the ballroom floor. She laughed too loudly, clutched his arm too tightly. Gregory followed close behind, nodding to men in tailored suits, whispering to women dripping in diamonds. Every move they made was calculated, each smile rehearsed. They were not celebrating love, they were celebrating conquest. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. I had seen people like them before. Years ago, teaching in classrooms filled with ambitious parents who pushed children beyond breaking points, I had learned to recognize ambition poisoned by arrogance. It was the same arrogance standing before me now, clothed in silk and gold. I returned to my seat, the corner that shielded me from the spotlight. From there I studied them like a chessboard, Natalie circling, Gregory directing, Andrew stumbling into the roles they had written for him. My son laughed, but it did not reach his eyes. He was being pulled, inch by inch, away from the boy I had raised into the man they wanted to mold. I picked up my glass, the champagne bubbles bursting softly against my lips. The taste was bitter, though the drink itself was sweet. I whispered quietly, so no one else could hear. Let them underestimate me. Let them mistake my silence for weakness. In the mirror behind the bar, I caught my reflection once more. My eyes were steady, colder than I remembered seeing them in years. They had drawn the first line, struck the first blow with words meant to wound. They thought they had succeeded, but what they did not know, what they could never imagine, was the truth that remained hidden in the letter Daniel had left me. $78 million, protected, untouched, waiting. And more than the money, he had left me the foresight to see through pretenses, to remain calm when others shouted, to fight battles not with fists, but with patience. Natalie's laughter rang out again, high and sharp, slicing through the music. Gregory raised a glass in a toast, his eyes scanning the room, lingering only briefly on me before sliding away. I set my glass down, unshaken. They had struck with words, with dismissive smiles and cruel hands, and they believed they had won. But the wedding was only the beginning. I knew they would come for me again, and when they did, they would discover that the seat they tried to bury me in had not made me smaller. It had given me the perfect view to see everything. The orchestra was playing louder now, the rhythm shifting to fill the ballroom with false cheer. Guests clapped to the beat, couples swayed on the dance floor, and waiters weaved through the crowd balancing trays of champagne. From my corner, I watched my son. Andrew kept smiling, but it was not the smile I remembered from his childhood. It was the kind of smile that trembles at the edges, stretched too far, held too long. His laugh cracked, sharp and shallow, as if each burst was forced through clenched teeth. He clung to Natalie's side, leaning too close, eager for her approval. She whispered into his ear and patted his arm like he was a prize she had already won. When his eyes glanced toward me, they did not linger. He looked away quickly, as though my presence unsettled him. He did it once, then again, and by the third time, I understood the truth. He was avoiding me, not because he hated me, but because he was ashamed. I lifted my glass, the champagne fizzing against my lips. I drank it down in one swallow, the sweetness gone bitter in my throat. My mind spoke words I did not voice. My son is walking straight into a trap, and he does not even see the bars closing around him. I set the empty glass on the table with a sharp click. No one noticed. They were too busy watching Natalie laugh at Gregory's stories, her voice bright, her gestures dramatic. Gregory, towering over Andrew, clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder. "Stand taller, son," Gregory said. "A man must carry himself with authority if he wants respect." I saw Andrew straighten instantly, shoulders back, chin raised. His face flushed, pleased with the command. He was desperate for Gregory's approval, blind to the insult hidden within it. Gregory was not teaching him to be strong. He was teaching him to obey. I rose from my seat, moved closer, and caught the end of their conversation. Natalie looked at Andrew with a smirk. "You'll learn so much from my father. He knows how to handle people. He knows how to handle money." Her eyes flicked toward me for just a moment, sharp and deliberate. She wanted me to hear. She wanted me to feel the sting. I kept my voice even. "Andrew already knows how to stand. I raised him to walk tall." He flinched at my words, though I had spoken gently. Natalie tightened her grip on his arm, nails pressing through the fabric of his sleeve. Yes, but marriage changes everything, doesn't it? We're building a new life now, with new guidance. Gregory chuckled, low and satisfied. Exactly. A family needs a foundation, and Andrew is finally finding his. Their words struck like stones thrown one after another. Each word chipped away at the image of me they wanted to erase. They were not just claiming Andrew. They were rewriting his story, erasing my role as if I had never existed. Andrew's lips parted, as though he might speak. His eyes met mine for a second, and in them I saw conflict. Then, just as quickly, he looked away, choosing silence. My heart twisted at the choice. I stepped back, refusing to let them see me falter. I would not give them that victory. Instead, I turned toward the bar, ordered another glass of champagne, and lifted it calmly. Around me, laughter soared, applause rose for another toast, but I was no longer listening to the noise. My focus stayed on Andrew, on the subtle signs that told me everything, the way he avoided my gaze, the way he leaned toward Natalie as though she were his shield, the way Gregory's voice filled the air, and Andrew nodded obediently, soaking in each word like gospel. I whispered under my breath, steady and cold, "He is stepping into their world, and they are tightening their grip with every passing hour." The thought was not fear, it was recognition. I had seen this kind of seduction before, the way influence seeps into someone's bones until they forget their own spine. My son was vulnerable, and they knew it. Natalie with her beauty and calculated charm, Gregory with his authority and manipulative praise. They were building a cage around Andrew, and he was stepping inside willingly. From across the room, Natalie raised her glass to someone, laughing again. Gregory's booming voice carried over the music. Andrew nodded, smiled, pretended, and all the while, his eyes never once returned to mine. A cold certainty settled in my chest. Storms were gathering, hidden beneath silk dresses and polished shoes. I had felt this chill before, years ago, when rumors of layoffs spread quietly through Daniel's office before the collapse of a company. The same hush of danger wrapped in civility. Tonight carried that same warning. I finished my drink, the bubbles gone flat, and set the glass down hard enough to make a faint crack against the wood. This was not just a wedding reception. It was the first move in a game they thought I was too old to play. I stood tall, eyes steady, and whispered to myself, "Let them play. Let them think I am invisible. They will not see me until it is too late." It was exactly 1 week after the wedding when the knock came at my door. The sound was crisp, too deliberate to belong to a neighbor or a passing friend. When I opened it, Natalie stood there, her smile polished, her arms clutching a thick leather folder. "Mother," she said, her voice dripping with warmth that never reached her eyes, "I came because I care about you. I want to make sure you are safe and protected." She stepped inside before I could invite her, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She placed the folder on my kitchen table, opening it with the flair of a lawyer presenting evidence. "This," she declared, "is a comprehensive protection plan. With it, you will never need to worry again. Andrew and I will handle everything for you." I lowered myself into the chair opposite her, folding my hands together. "Everything," I repeated, my tone flat. "Yes," she said quickly, sliding papers toward me. "Financial management, medical decisions, property oversight. It is all here. All you need to do is sign. We will take the weight off your shoulders." I looked at the pages. Bold letters at the top read, "Durable Power of Attorney." Another set, "Healthcare Proxy." My lips pressed tight, though my pulse remained steady. These documents were not protection. They were chains disguised as gifts. With one signature, I would surrender every piece of control, my home, my money, even my right to decide how I lived or died. I let my finger trace one line slowly. "So, if I sign this, you and Andrew will have authority over all my finances." Natalie's smile widened, rehearsed and radiant. "Yes, but only to help you. Think of it as love in writing." Her words struck me like a slap, sharper than the one she had delivered at the wedding. She thought she was clever. She thought I would be flattered by her false devotion. Instead, I saw desperation hiding beneath her polished act. I lifted my eyes to hers. "Do you believe I am incapable of making my own decisions?" Her expression flickered, the smile slipping for the briefest second. She recovered quickly, leaning forward with her hands clasped. "No, of course not. But you are 71. Life is unpredictable. What if you fall? What if you forget things? Andrew worries. We both worry. Let us take the burden." Andrew worries. The words stung. She was using my son's name as a weapon, forging his concern into her strategy. My jaw tightened. Andrew never mentioned this plan to me. Her eyes hardened just for a moment. "He trusts me to handle things. We both want what is best for you. Surely you understand that." I pushed the folder back toward her slowly. "What I understand is that concern can wear many faces, some genuine, some greedy." She flushed, but she did not back down. "You are misjudging me. This is about family, about protecting legacy. If you sign these documents, we can ensure everything stays safe for generations to come." Her words were smooth, but her eyes betrayed hunger, not love, not respect. Hunger. I stood, moving to the counter where a pot of tea simmered quietly. My movements were calm, deliberate. "Natalie," I said evenly, "when a person truly wants to help, they bring their hands, not their contracts." She bristled, her voice sharp now. "You think I am the enemy, but I am trying to save you from yourself. Without these papers, what if someone else takes advantage of you?" I turned, holding her gaze with ice. "The only person placing papers in front of me right now is you." The silence between us thickened. She tapped her nails against the folder, her mask slipping more with each passing second. She had expected gratitude, obedience, maybe even tears. Instead, she was facing resistance she had not prepared for. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, lips pressed into a thin line. "Think about it," she said, her tone clipped. "I will leave the documents here. Read them carefully. You will see this is for the best." I shook my head once. No. If it truly was for the best, I would not need convincing. Her smile returned, but now it was strained, brittle at the edges. She gathered her things quickly, leaving the folder behind as if it might poison me into compliance. At the door, she turned, her eyes sharp as glass. "You can trust me, Margaret. I am your family now." I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. Family does not arrive with a pen in one hand and a claim in the other. Family shows up with respect. Her face hardened. She opened the door and left without another word. The silence of the house wrapped around me again. I sat back at the kitchen table, staring at the folder she had left behind. The bold letters glared up at me, daring me to surrender. My hand hovered above it before I pushed it away entirely. I whispered to the empty room. "So this is their game. They call it care, but it is nothing more than control." The clock ticked loudly on the wall, each second a reminder that this was only the beginning. They thought I would bend. They thought they had found the perfect excuse, but their concern was nothing more than a weapon dressed in silk. The very next afternoon, there was another knock at my door. This time, the sound was heavier, more confident, like it belonged to someone who already believed the house was his. I opened it to see Gregory Brooks standing tall, his smile tight, his eyes sharp. He carried no folder, no gift, just the arrogance of a man certain of his authority. "Margaret," he said smoothly, "I hope I am not intruding. I thought it would be wise if we had a talk. Man to woman, family to family." I stepped aside without a word. He entered as if he had been invited 1,000 times before, his polished shoes echoing across the hardwood. He sat directly in the center of my living room sofa, spreading himself wide, owning the space with his presence. I chose the armchair across from him, my back straight, my hands folded calmly in my lap. He cleared his throat and began in a voice that sounded measured but carried a weight of command. You know, people your age often find themselves in vulnerable positions. Scammers, con artists, bad investments. It is a dangerous world. My concern is simple. You need protection. I rose, walked to the side table and poured tea into 2 cups. The porcelain clinked softly. My voice was calm as I returned to my seat, sliding 1 cup toward him. I have lived long enough, Mr. Brooks, to know exactly who needs protection, and it is not me. His smile stiffened. He sipped the tea but did not enjoy it. You misunderstand. I am not saying you are incapable, but let us be realistic. Age has a way of blurring judgment. Andrew is building a future. Natalie is strong, resourceful. Together, they can provide the support you require. I held his gaze, unflinching. Support is offered with open hands, not with contracts hidden in folders. His eyes narrowed, though his tone stayed smooth. Natalie may have been too eager. She only wants the best for you. But I am a man who understands the law, the risks, the loopholes. I can ensure your estate remains secure. You would be wise to let me guide the process. I set my cup down gently, the sound crisp against the table. Guide or control? His jaw flexed. For the first time, the mask cracked. He leaned forward, his elbows pressing into his knees, his voice dropping lower, sharper. Do not make this difficult, Margaret. You are a widow, alone. Andrew is your only child. His future depends on stability. If you care for him, you will allow us to take responsibility. I felt a flicker of anger, but kept my voice steel cold. Daniel and I gave Andrew everything he needed to stand on his own 2 feet. If he cannot now, it is not because I failed him. It is because you want him dependent on you. His lips curved into a smirk, one that did not reach his eyes. And what will you do when you can no longer manage, when illness strikes, when decisions need to be made quickly? Who will protect you then? Neighbors, old friends, or the family right here, ready to step in? I leaned forward, matching his intensity. Family does not circle like vultures, Mr. Brooks. Family does not measure love in signatures and legal power. You speak of protection, but I hear ambition. You speak of stability, but I see greed. For the first time, silence fell. His hands tightened around the teacup, the porcelain creaking under the strain. He set it down abruptly, his smile gone. You think I am your enemy, he said slowly. But I am your only real ally. Without me, without Natalie, Andrew will never succeed. He needs structure, guidance. He needs me. I let the words settle in the room, heavy and poisonous. Then I answered with precision, each syllable sharp as glass. Andrew does not need you. It's not. He needs to remember who raised him, who taught him right from wrong, who showed him how to stand when others tried to push him down. And I assure you, Mr. Brooks, he will not forget. His eyes flashed with something darker, frustration, maybe even rage, but he forced another smile. We will see. In time you will realize that resisting me is resisting the inevitable. I do not lose, Margaret. I never lose. I rose from my chair, standing tall above him despite his height. My voice was calm, almost soft, but firm enough to leave no doubt. Then you have just encountered your first exception. The air between us grew taut. He stood abruptly, adjusted his jacket, and moved to the door without another word. As he stepped outside, he turned back once more, his voice low and cold. Think carefully. You are not as untouchable as you believe. I closed the door slowly, locking it behind him. My heart pounded, but not from fear, from certainty. Gregory Brooks had revealed himself. His mask of care was gone, replaced by naked ambition. He had come into my home, sat in my chair, and tried to break me. But I was not broken. I walked back to the living room, lifting the teacup he had left untouched. The surface was cracked where his grip had been too strong. I studied it for a moment, then whispered, "The mask is breaking already, and soon, so will you." The clock ticked against the quiet walls. I sat back down, steady, resolute. The game had begun, and I knew their next move would be bolder, sharper, more desperate. That was the way with people like Gregory. They start with smiles, then press harder when smiles fail. But he had underestimated me. He thought age was weakness. He thought silence meant surrender. He thought control could be stolen with signatures and threats. He was wrong. I had lived long enough to recognize predators, and I had prepared long before this moment. The evening after Gregory left my house, I received a call from Andrew. His voice was soft, hesitant. "Mother, can I come by?" I agreed, though I already knew the conversation waiting for me. When he arrived, he looked tired, his tie loosened, his eyes darting like a man caught between fire and water. He stepped inside and closed the door slowly, as if afraid the world would hear what he was about to say. We sat in the living room where his father once read the newspaper every night. Andrew rubbed his hands together, avoiding my eyes. Finally, he spoke. "Natalie only wants what's best, Mother. You know she cares. She just wants to protect you. And her father, he's a lawyer. He knows how to handle things." I leaned back, studying my son carefully. His words were steady, but his eyes betrayed him. They flickered, restless, as though he was not entirely convinced of what he was saying. His lips trembled at the corners. It was not conviction I saw. It was fear. Fear of displeasing his wife, fear of losing her approval. I asked calmly, "And do you believe them, Andrew? Do you believe I need them to handle my life for me?" He looked up quickly, shaking his head. "It's not that you can't. Of course you can. But Natalie thinks, if you let them manage things, you won't have to worry anymore. You'll be safe." The word safe struck me like a warning bell. I had lived long enough to know when safety was being used as a cage. My voice sharpened. "Safe from what? Safe from living my own life? Safe from my own choices?" He swallowed hard. "Safe from mistakes. From people taking advantage of you." I rose slowly and walked toward the window. Outside, the garden Daniel and I had planted stood still in the night, the roses bowing under the weight of the dew. I turned back, my voice measured but firm. "The only people trying to take advantage of me, Andrew, are standing beside you every night at the dinner table." He flinched, as though I had struck him. "Don't say that, Mother. Natalie isn't like that. I cut him off. "She came here with a folder of legal documents. She asked me to sign away my finances and my rights. That is not love, Andrew. That is ambition." His face paled. He glanced at the floor, his fingers twisting together nervously. Finally, he whispered, "She thought it would make things easier. For all of us." "Easier for whom?" I demanded, my tone sharper now. "For me, who would lose everything, or for her, who would gain control?" He could not answer. His silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. I pressed forward, unwilling to let him hide in excuses. "Andrew, look at me." He lifted his eyes slowly. They were glassy, uncertain. I said clearly, "Your father and I built this life with our own hands. We raised you with honesty and strength. And now you sit here telling me that strangers, because that's what they are, no matter the vows you spoke, know better how to protect me than I do. Do you not hear how insulting that is?" His voice cracked. "I just don't want to lose her." There it was. The truth spilled out in one trembling sentence. Not concern for me, not faith in Natalie's plan, fear of being abandoned by the woman who had wrapped him so tightly in her world. I felt a mixture of sorrow and anger, but I steadied my tone. "And in keeping her, you are willing to lose me?" He shook his head quickly, his voice rising. "No, of course not. I love you, Mother, but she needs to feel secure. Her father, he keeps telling her that if we don't step in now, something could happen, and then we'll regret it." I narrowed my eyes. "So it is not just Natalie's voice whispering in your ear. It is Gregory's, too." He did not deny it. His silence was answer enough. I stepped closer, placing a hand firmly on his shoulder. Listen to me, Andrew. A man who truly loves his wife does not let her father control him. And a son who truly loves his mother does not stand by while she is cornered. You are being used. And if you do not open your eyes, you will lose more than you ever imagined. He pulled away slightly, torn, his lips quivering. You don't understand. If I stand against them, I'll destroy my marriage. If I stand with them, I betray you. My voice cut through his hesitation, sharp and unwavering. Then decide which betrayal you can live with, Andrew, because there will be no middle ground. Not this time. He buried his face in his hands, groaning softly. I don't want to choose. I stood taller, my resolve unshakable. You already are choosing. Every silence, every nod, every moment you look away instead of speaking, you are choosing. And you are not choosing me. The truth pierced him. He looked up, tears shining in his eyes, his face pale. I'm trying, Mother. I don't know how to fix this. I softened my tone only slightly, letting warmth touch the edges of my words without dulling their steel. You fix it by remembering who you are, not Gregory's puppet, not Natalie's shield, my son. A man raised to stand, not to bow. He sat frozen, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. The battle inside him was visible, tearing at him from both sides. I let the silence stretch, refusing to rescue him from the weight of his own choices. Finally, he whispered, I need time. I stepped back, my eyes steady. Time is the one thing you do not have, Andrew. They are moving fast. They already tried to take my signature. Next, they will try something stronger. And when they do, you will not have the luxury of standing in the middle. He said nothing more. He rose slowly, his shoulders slumped, his steps heavy as he moved toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back, his voice raw. Please believe me. I'm not against you. I'm just trying to hold everything together. I answered without hesitation. The moment you try to hold everything, you lose what matters most. Remember that. He closed the door behind him, and I was left alone in the quiet. I stood there, my heart aching but my resolve stronger than ever. I whispered into the silence, You are my son, Andrew, and one day you will see them for who they are. But until then, I will stand alone if I must. That night, after Andrew left my house torn and shaken, I walked down the hallway of my Princeton home to the study Daniel and I had built together. The room smelled faintly of cedarwood and old books, the shelves lined with decades of memories, photographs, journals, contracts from years past. In the corner stood the iron safe Daniel had purchased long before his illness, hidden behind a cabinet that only I ever moved. I knelt, spun the dial, and felt the tumblers click into place. My fingers did not tremble. I had opened this safe countless times, yet tonight carried a different weight. When the door creaked open, I pulled out a small wooden box, polished smooth with age. Inside rested a sealed envelope, the handwriting across the front instantly familiar. Daniel's hand. I sat at the desk, broke the seal, and unfolded the letter. His voice returned to me in every word. My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, I am gone. I leave you not only my love, but the protection of all I built. $78 million in assets now rests in your care, secured in an irrevocable trust. No signature, no scheme, no manipulation can strip this from you. Do not speak of it to anyone. Do not boast. Do not reveal. Remember, silence is your greatest weapon. They will underestimate you. Let them. The power of being unseen is stronger than the power of being feared. I read the lines again, the ink steady though the hand that wrote them had long turned to dust. 78 million. The number itself had always felt unreal, even to me. But Daniel's wisdom was not in the money. It was in the shield he had placed around it, the foresight to keep vultures at bay. He had seen the world clearly, even at the edge of death. I whispered into the quiet, You knew they would come, didn't you, Daniel? The house answered only with silence, but the weight of his foresight pressed heavy on my shoulders. He had given me armor, and tonight I knew why. I folded the letter carefully, returned it to its box, and locked the safe again. Then I stood in front of the shelves, staring at the photographs of Andrew as a child. His smile then was untainted, pure joy shining from his eyes. Now that smile was gone, buried under Natalie's control and Gregory's grip. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with resolve. I remembered Natalie at my table, pressing those papers toward me. I remembered Gregory on my sofa, speaking of protection while his eyes betrayed greed. They thought I was just an old widow clutching a modest pension. They thought my only weapon was sentiment. But I had 78 million reasons to prove them wrong. I pulled open a drawer and retrieved a small recorder, the same one I had used years ago as a teacher to document lessons. I placed it on the desk, pressed the button, and watched the red light blink. If they wanted to play games with contracts and threats, I would build my own arsenal: evidence, truth, proof. My voice came out calm but edged with steel. If they believe I am defenseless, they will speak freely, and when they do, I will have the truth in my hands. I shut the recorder off and slipped it into my purse. My plan was clear. I would not confront them with money or power. I would confront them with patience. Let them reveal themselves piece by piece. Let them tighten their own rope until it strangled them. I moved through the house, turning off lights, securing locks, feeling the silence wrap around me like armor. For the first time in weeks, I felt no fear, only certainty. Before going upstairs, I returned once more to the study and placed my hand on the safe. My voice was low, almost a vow. Daniel, I will protect what you left me. I will guard it not only for myself, but for the dignity of our family. They will not win, not while I can still breathe. The moonlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. I climbed the staircase slowly, my back straight, my resolve unshakable. Tonight, the game shifted. They believed they had cornered me, but they had no idea what fortress already stood around me, built by Daniel's foresight, sealed with my silence. I whispered into the dark as I reached my bedroom door. They wanted weakness. They will find steel. Natalie called me 2 days later with a voice sweet as syrup. Mother, let me treat you. There's a new restaurant in Manhattan. Elegant, private. It will be the perfect place for us to clear the air. I accepted, my tone soft, as though I were flattered. In truth, my heart beat steady, purposeful. Before leaving, I slipped the small recorder into the inner pocket of my jacket. Tonight, they would not just reveal themselves, they would indict themselves. The restaurant was all glass walls and golden chandeliers, waiters moving like dancers in starched uniforms. Natalie had chosen a table in full view of the room, where every patron could see her charm at work. She rose when I arrived, her gown crimson, her smile rehearsed. "Mother," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek, "you look radiant." I sat opposite her, laying my napkin across my lap, my face a mask of gentle gratitude. A waiter poured wine into crystal glasses. Natalie lifted hers with a flourish. "To family," she said. I raised mine slowly. "To family," I echoed, though the word sat heavy on my tongue. We sipped, and she leaned in, her voice honeyed but laced with something colder. "I've been thinking about your situation. You must feel the weight of everything Daniel left behind. It's too much for one person." I tilted my head. "I manage well enough." Her laugh tinkled, high and false. "Of course you do. But things can change so quickly at your age. A fall, an illness. People might start to question your clarity." Her eyes glittered as she let the word linger. Clarity, a calculated insult dressed as concern. I set my glass down carefully. "And your solution?" She reached into her designer purse, pulling out another neat folder. She slid it across the white linen tablecloth as though it were a gift. "A comprehensive plan, all legal, all airtight. If you sign these, Andrew and I can ensure everything runs smoothly. No one will ever doubt your judgment, because you'll have us handling matters." I touched the folder with my fingertips, not opening it, letting the silence stretch. Then I smiled faintly, as though grateful. "You think of everything, Natalie." Her hand brushed mine, cold and firm. "It's the safest option. But the longer you wait, the more others might speculate. And you know how rumors spread. A delay could make people wonder if you're still fully capable." Inside my jacket, the recorder captured every word, every sharpened phrase. I forced my expression into mild confusion. "You mean people might think I'm unfit?" Her smile widened. "Not now, of course, but eventually. Judges, doctors, they listen to whispers. Better to be proactive, don't you think?" The cruelty was elegant, cloaked in silk. She was not simply asking me to sign. She was warning me, comply, or risk being declared incompetent. I let out a small laugh, the kind that sounded fragile, even naive. "You're very persuasive, my dear. I suppose I should be grateful for your foresight." Her eyes gleamed, mistaking my performance for surrender. She leaned back in her chair, triumphant. "Grateful is the right word. Andrew and I only want to protect you. The sooner we finalize this, the sooner you can relax, free of worry." I picked up my glass again, letting the crystal catch the light. "You and Gregory make quite the team," I said softly. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she recovered. "Gregory only wants what's best. He knows the law better than anyone. He's dedicated his entire life to ensuring families stay strong." "Families like yours," I said, meeting her gaze directly. Her smile froze, just for an instant. Then she covered it with another sip of wine. "And now, families like ours." I nodded, as though convinced, though inside I felt the chill of her arrogance. She believed she had already won. She believed my silence was surrender, my composure weakness. But every word, every sly threat, every false smile was now sealed on tape. The waiter returned with entrees, setting down plates with delicate precision. Natalie lifted her fork, her appetite sharp. "So, Mother, when shall we arrange the signing? Tomorrow? Next week? The sooner the safer." I dabbed my lips with the napkin and gave her the faintest smile. "Soon. I promise you, very soon." Her shoulders relaxed, and she sighed with satisfaction. She had no idea that her confidence was the rope tightening around her own neck. As dessert menus arrived, I excused myself to the restroom. Behind the locked door, I pulled out the recorder, checked the blinking red light, and allowed myself a single, cold smile. The trap was not mine. It was hers, sprung by her own words, her own greed, her own arrogance. When I returned, Natalie was glowing, already imagining the fortune in her grasp. She reached for my hand across the table. "You'll see, Margaret. This is the beginning of something beautiful for all of us." I clasped her hand lightly, my smile gentle, my voice soft as silk. "Yes, Natalie, beautiful indeed." Inside, though, my thoughts were steel. Tonight, she revealed herself to me completely, and soon she would reveal herself to the world. It happened on a gray Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting in my living room, a pot of tea steaming beside me, when the doorbell rang. Through the glass pane, I saw them. Gregory in his tailored suit, Natalie in another designer dress, and behind them a man carrying a leather briefcase. His face was solemn, his hands careful as he adjusted his spectacles. A notary. I opened the door with a calm smile. "Gregory, Natalie, what a surprise." Gregory stepped inside as though the house already belonged to him. "We thought it best to come by directly, to simplify matters." Natalie trailed behind, her smile too wide, her voice coated in honey. "Mother, this will only take a few minutes. We brought everything you need. A notary makes it official. No more worries, no more delays." The notary offered a polite nod. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Collins. I am here to witness your signature, nothing more." I gestured to the table. "Very well. Please, sit." They spread out the papers across my oak dining table, the pages crisp and waiting. Gregory slid a pen toward me. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. All you need to do is sign here. Once done, Andrew and Natalie can ensure every matter is handled properly. No one will question your competence again." I lowered myself into the chair, my hand hovering above the page. My fingers trembled slightly, but not from fear. The performance had to be convincing. I let the pen brush against the line, my breath uneven, as though the weight of the decision crushed me. Natalie leaned closer, her perfume cloying. "It's for your own good, Mother. Sign, and you'll never have to carry the burden again." Gregory's eyes narrowed, his patience thinning. "Do it now. The notary cannot wait all day." I lowered my gaze, letting them believe they had broken me. With a small, shaky sigh, I pressed the pen to paper, only not on their contract. Instead, I signed a carefully prepared copy, identical in appearance, but stripped of any legal force. I slid it forward with trembling hands. "There," I whispered, my voice frail. "It's done." Natalie clapped her hands softly, relief flashing across her face. "Finally. You'll thank us one day." But Gregory's arrogance betrayed him. He leaned back, smug, and muttered under his breath, "If she hadn't signed, we'd have no choice but to prove she was incompetent. Courts always listen when the family speaks." The words slipped out like venom, careless in his triumph. I froze, then slowly set the pen down. The air tightened in the room. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and pressed a button. A red light blinked. The room filled with Natalie's syrupy tone and Gregory's threats, their own voices echoing back at them. Every insult, every coercive word captured with clarity. Natalie's face drained of color. What is that?" I stood, my voice no longer frail but sharp as steel. "Insurance. You walked into my home thinking I was defenseless. You spoke freely, believing my silence meant surrender. But silence, as Daniel taught me, is a shield, and tonight you handed me the sword." The notary's eyes widened. He cleared his throat nervously. "Mrs. Collins, if there has been coercion—" "There has," I interrupted firmly, sliding the phone across the table, "and you are witness to it." Gregory slammed his fist against the wood, rattling the teacups. "You think this recording will stop us? Courts care about signatures, not games." I met his glare without flinching. "Courts care about the truth, and you just delivered it to me, bound in your own arrogance." Natalie's lips quivered, her mask of charm splintering. "Andrew won't forgive you. You're turning him against me." I stepped closer, my eyes never leaving hers. "I don't need to turn him against you. You're doing that yourself." The notary rose abruptly, gathering his briefcase. "I cannot be part of this," he said, his voice tight. "It's clear the signature was given under pressure. I will file no validation." He hurried toward the door, leaving silence in his wake. Gregory's composure cracked at last. His jaw clenched, his voice low and seething. "You'll regret this, Margaret. You have no idea who you're fighting." I straightened, the years of widowhood, motherhood, and solitude rising in me like armor. "No, Gregory, it is you who has no idea who you're underestimating." The air hung thick as they gathered their papers in silence. Natalie's hands shook as she stuffed them back into her bag. Without another word, they stormed out, slamming the door behind them. I stood in the quiet, the echo of their threats still in the room. My hand brushed the safe in the study, Daniel's letter etched in my mind. "Silence is your greatest weapon." Tonight, silence had transformed into revelation, and the battle had only just begun. The room was a tomb of silence. Only the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway reminded us that time had not stopped. The notary stood frozen near the door, his briefcase clutched tightly in his hands, his eyes wide behind his spectacles. Natalie's face had gone pale. Her lipstick seemed almost garish against the sudden drain of color. Andrew sat stiff in his chair, his forked loyalty carved into the lines of his jaw. Gregory, however, was the one who broke the silence first. His face flushed crimson, his eyes narrowing into slits. "You dare set me up?" he hissed, his voice low, vibrating with rage. His hand slammed against the table, rattling the untouched teacups. I met his glare without a flicker of hesitation. My voice came out steady, deliberate. "No, Gregory, I didn't set you up. I simply gave you space to reveal who you already are." The words cut through the tension like glass shattering on stone. Natalie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at me as though seeing me for the first time, not as the frail widow she had imagined, but as something far more dangerous. Gregory leaned forward, his fists pressed to the table. "You think a little recording changes anything? You think the courts will side with you? Signatures matter, Mrs. Collins. Families matter. Judges listen to blood, not widows clinging to fading power." I tilted my head slightly, a small, cold smile curving my lips. "And what do you think judges will hear when they listen to your threats? When they hear you declare I'm incompetent, even while I sit here holding your words like evidence?" Andrew shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between me and his in-laws. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Dad, stop." But Gregory's fury was a storm unleashed. "She's twisting everything, Andrew. She's trying to pit us against each other. Can't you see that?" Natalie's composure cracked further. She reached out, clutching Gregory's arm, her voice sharp with panic. "Father, enough! She recorded us. We need to—" I cut her off, my tone sharp as a blade. "You need to what, Natalie? Silence me? Drag me into court? Spread whispers that I'm losing my mind? You already played those cards, and now the whole table sees your hand." The notary cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Brooks, Mrs. Brooks, I cannot validate any of this. It is clear Mrs. Collins was under pressure. Any attempt to push these documents further could constitute fraud." His words trembled, but the authority of his office gave them weight. Natalie's eyes welled with tears, but they weren't of sorrow. They were of fury denied. "Andrew," she whispered fiercely, "say something. Hey, tell her she's wrong. Tell her we're doing this for her own good." Andrew's mouth opened, but no words came. His silence screamed louder than any protest. I turned to him, my voice softer yet edged with disappointment. "Andrew, I raised you to know the difference between love and control, between guidance and manipulation. Do you really not see the truth standing in front of you?" His lips trembled. He looked down, ashamed, unable to meet my gaze. Gregory snapped, his patience gone. "Enough of this performance. You're a stubborn old woman clinging to scraps of power. One way or another, Margaret, this ends with us holding the reins. You don't have the strength to fight forever." I straightened, letting the steel in my spine show. "You mistake silence for weakness, but silence has given me time, Gregory. Time to prepare, time to record, time to let you write your own confession. You handed me every weapon I need." The room trembled with his fury. Natalie's mask of elegance collapsed, her voice shrill now. "You'll regret this. Do you think Andrew will stand by you when we're through? Do you think anyone will? You'll die alone, bitter and penniless." I walked to the edge of the table, my eyes locked on hers. "If I must die alone, I will die with my dignity intact. That is something you will never understand." Her lips quivered, rage choking her into silence. The notary finally found his courage. He snapped his briefcase shut. "This session is over. Any further attempt to push this will be on record, and I will testify if called." He turned toward the door. "Good evening." The slam of the door echoed like a gavel striking wood. Gregory glared at me one last time, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won a battle, but this war isn't over." I didn't flinch. "It ended the moment you showed the world your true face." Natalie dragged Andrew to his feet, her hand digging into his arm. He followed her numbly, his eyes glazed, as though pieces of his world had just cracked apart. They stormed out, the sound of their heels and shoes pounding against the hardwood floor until only silence remained once again. I stood alone in the living room, the teacups still rattling faintly on the table. My heart beat steady. The mask had shattered. Their threats were no longer shadows whispered in private. They had been exposed in the light. I picked up the recorder, held it in my hand, and whispered into the stillness, "Daniel." I kept quiet when it mattered, and thank heavens I did. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a deep breath. Not because the war was over, but because I had seen the cracks in their armor, and now, with evidence in hand, I was ready to strike back. The fallout came faster than I expected. Gregory had built a career on intimidation, on subtle manipulations whispered in courtrooms and offices, but he had made one fatal mistake. He let his arrogance spill out into my recorder. Within days, the evidence was delivered to the State Bar Association. I still remember the phone call from a colleague of his, a man whose voice shook with disbelief. "Margaret, do you realize what you've done? Gregory's reputation is finished. The board has opened an inquiry. They'll investigate every case he's touched in the last 10 years. Coercion of a vulnerable client is professional suicide." I thanked him quietly, then hung up. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a smile that reached my eyes. Natalie, on the other hand, faced a different punishment. Word spread quickly among Andrew's relatives. At Sunday dinner in Trenton, I didn't even need to speak. The cousins, aunts, and uncles had already heard the whispers, that she and her father had cornered me in my own home, that their concern had been nothing but greed. When she entered the room on Andrew's arm, silence fell like a curtain. No one offered her a seat. No one greeted her with warmth. Conversations resumed only after she sat down, their voices sharpened with judgment. Her smile faltered under the weight of so many cold eyes. I caught her glance once across the table. The fury was still there, but beneath it I saw something else, a flicker of fear. She was no longer admired as the brilliant new wife. She was tolerated, scrutinized, distrusted. Andrew bore the brunt of it too. He sat stiffly, his shoulders hunched, a man trapped between two collapsing walls. That night after dinner, he came to me, his face pale. "I can't stay there anymore, Mother," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "The house feels like a prison. Natalie's anger never stops. And Father, he's furious with me for not stopping you. He says I've ruined everything." I studied him for a long moment. "And what do you say, Andrew? Did you ruin everything?" He rubbed his forehead, his hands trembling. "I don't know. All I know is I'm caught in the middle. I love her, but I can't bear the way she talks about you. It's like you're an obstacle to be erased, not family." His words struck me deeply. For all his weakness, there was pain in his eyes that could not be faked. He was a son torn apart, a husband clinging to something he could no longer defend. That week he packed a bag. Neighbors saw him loading his car late at night, the porch light casting his shadow long across the driveway. He left Natalie's house quietly, no shouting, no drama, just silence, the kind that spoke louder than words. When he arrived at my door, suitcase in hand, he looked smaller than I remembered. "I just need time to think," he whispered. "I can't keep pretending everything is fine." I opened the door wider. "Then come in, Andrew. Time is something I can give you. Clarity, however, that you must find yourself." Meanwhile, Gregory's downfall spread beyond the legal board. Newspapers picked up the story, not by name at first, but by reputation. Prominent New Jersey attorney under investigation for elder coercion. Clients began to withdraw, colleagues distanced themselves. The man who once strutted into rooms now had to endure whispers at his back. Natalie tried to salvage her place in society, but every charity event, every luncheon turned into a silent battlefield. Women whispered behind their champagne glasses. Men nodded politely, but avoided her gaze. She was no longer the charming wife of Andrew Collins. She was the daughter of a disgraced lawyer, the woman who had tried to strip an old widow of her rights. I heard about it from a neighbor who had attended one such event. "She looked brittle, Margaret, like glass about to crack. No one wants to stand too close to someone whose mask has shattered." And in that, I found no joy, only a quiet confirmation of what Daniel had always said. Greed has a way of consuming itself. But the greatest twist was yet to come. One evening, Andrew sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he barely sipped. His eyes were tired but clearer than I had seen in months. "They're falling apart, Mother," he admitted softly. "Natalie's rage, Father's disgrace, it's tearing them down. And I don't know where I belong anymore." I placed my hand over his. "You belong where truth lives, Andrew. That choice will never be easy, but it will always be right." His eyes glistened. "And if the cost of choosing truth is losing her, then you'll know what she truly was," I answered firmly. The room was silent after that, the kind of silence that carries both grief and liberation. The family that had tried to corner me was now cornered themselves, by their arrogance, their greed, their own words turned against them. Piece by piece, their empire of illusions was crumbling. I looked out the window into the night sky, the stars faint above Princeton's rooftops, and whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning. Their collapse will not end here." A week after the confrontation, I drove into Manhattan to meet with the one man Daniel had always trusted, Robert Hale, our longtime attorney. His office sat high above the city, the windows overlooking a skyline that gleamed cold and sharp. Robert was waiting for me, his silver hair neat, his expression calm but curious. "Margaret," he said warmly as I entered, "I've been expecting you." I sat down across from him, placing my handbag gently on the polished mahogany desk. My voice was steady. "Robert, I need clarity. Gregory and Natalie are circling me like vultures. They came with a notary, with contracts, with threats. They believe they can take everything Daniel left me. I need to know how strong my protection truly is." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Have you opened the safe recently?" I nodded. "Yes. I read Daniel's letter again. He wrote of an irrevocable trust, but I need to hear it from you, plain and without embellishment." Robert pulled a thick folder from his cabinet, setting it between us. "Your husband anticipated this long before it began. Daniel transferred every major asset into an irrevocable trust 2 years before he passed. Property, investments, accounts, it's all locked. You are the beneficiary. No one else has access. Not Andrew, not Natalie, not even you, in the sense of undoing it. The trust cannot be revoked, Margaret. That's the point." I frowned. "Even if I signed what they pushed in front of me?" He shook his head firmly. "Even then. Any signature you gave under duress would be meaningless against this structure. The trustees follow Daniel's terms, not yours. His plan was ironclad. He knew greed might come for you, so he built walls no hand could breach." I exhaled slowly, the weight of weeks of pressure lifting from my chest. For so long, I had carried the fear that one misstep, one shaky pen stroke, could end everything. Now I understood the genius of Daniel's foresight. "So, all their maneuvering," I murmured, "all their threats, all their papers, they were chasing shadows." Robert allowed himself a small smile. "Exactly. They thought they had you cornered. In truth, they were wrestling a phantom. Even if they paraded you into court tomorrow, nothing would change. The trust is unbreakable." I let the silence stretch, the revelation settling deep inside me. My enemies had believed I was a lamb to be led, but Daniel had armed me with a fortress they could never penetrate. Robert's tone grew serious. "Still, Margaret, don't underestimate them. People like Gregory don't vanish when the first door closes. They will look for another angle, public humiliation, family manipulation, even fraud. But now you know the truth. Your fortune is untouchable." I leaned forward, my eyes steady. "Then it's time I stopped playing defense. If the assets are safe, I can fight them on my terms, and I will." For the first time in days, Robert laughed quietly. "I almost pity them, almost." As I left his office, the city lights burned bright against the winter sky. I walked the streets of Manhattan with my head higher than it had been in weeks. Every step echoed Daniel's words, "Silence is your shield." And now I saw the deeper truth. His silence had been a design, a map leading me to this moment. I returned home that evening to find Andrew waiting on my porch. His suitcase still sat in his car. He looked worn, as though each day pulled him further apart. "Mother," he said quietly, "Natalie's furious. She says you're destroying her family. She swore she'll never forgive you." I unlocked the door, holding it open for him. Her anger is not my burden. What she tried to take was never hers. He followed me inside, his voice hollow. "I don't know what to believe anymore." I turned to him, my expression unyielding. "Then believe this. Daniel saw this coming. He built protections long before you even met Natalie. Nothing they do can touch what he left. The fortune is secure, Andrew. What they wanted was always out of reach." His mouth fell open, disbelief flooding his face. "You mean, even if you had signed?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Even then, their entire plan was doomed before it began." He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "God, what have I done? I let them push you. I let them corner you, and all the while, it was for nothing." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not for nothing, Andrew. They revealed themselves, and now you must choose where you stand." He looked up at me, his eyes wet. "I'm so sorry, Mother." I did not answer right away. I only met his gaze, letting him feel the weight of his apology. Finally, I whispered, "Then start proving it." That night, as I lay in bed, I held Daniel's letter close to my chest. The man I had loved had foreseen every step of this war. He had left me not only wealth, but the wisdom to outlast those who underestimated me. And now, with truth in my hands and evidence in my pocket, I was ready for the next battle. Andrew came to me one rainy afternoon, his clothes damp, his face pale. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. The sound of the storm outside filled the silence between us as he stood in my doorway, his suitcase still in the trunk of his car. "Mother," he whispered, his voice unsteady, "I'm sorry. I never thought it would come to this. I never thought Natalie and Father would push so far. I didn't know." I motioned for him to come in. We sat across from each other in the living room, the old clock ticking steadily in the background. He stared at the floor, his hands twisting together nervously. I let him sit with the silence before I spoke. My voice was firm, deliberate. "Andrew, you may lose many things in this life, money, status, even love. But never, ever lose the respect you owe to your parents. Once that's gone, you cannot buy it back." His head snapped up, guilt carved across his features. I know I failed you. I let them speak for me, act for me, and I just stood there. I thought I was protecting my marriage, but all I did was betray you." I leaned forward, my eyes never leaving his. "You betrayed yourself, Andrew. When you bowed to their demands, you became smaller than the man your father raised you to be. Do you think Daniel wanted his son to cower behind a woman's threats, behind her father's shadow?" He winced at his father's name. His voice cracked. "I was afraid of losing her, afraid of being alone." I pressed on, my words cutting but not cruel. "Fear is no excuse. Love that demands betrayal of your blood is not love. It's control. And the sooner you see that, the sooner you will stop drowning in it." Andrew buried his face in his hands, his shoulders trembling. "How do I come back from this? How do I fix what I've done?" I let a moment pass, the storm outside echoing his turmoil. Then I answered, my voice steady as stone. "You start by standing. Stand when they tell you to sit. Speak when they tell you to be silent. Protect what is right, even when it costs you. That is how you earn back your respect, not only mine, but your own." He looked up at me, tears brimming in his eyes. Do you still believe in me?" I inhaled slowly, the weight of his question heavy. "I believe in the man you can still choose to be. But belief alone will not save you, Andrew. Action will. Courage will." His lips trembled. "And if I lose her because of it?" I held his gaze unwavering. "Then you will know the truth. A wife who demands you dishonor your mother is not a wife worth keeping. Better to lose her than to lose yourself." The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. He closed his eyes, letting them sink in. When he opened them again, something had shifted. The boy who had trembled at Natalie's side was gone. In his place sat a man on the edge of resolve. He nodded slowly. "You're right. I can't live like this anymore." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "Your father left you his name, Andrew. Carry it with strength. Don't let Gregory or Natalie rewrite who you are." For the first time in weeks, his grip tightened around mine, not weak or hesitant, but firm. "I won't. Not anymore." The storm outside began to ease, the rain softening against the windows. Andrew sat taller, his eyes clearer than I had seen since his wedding day. He was still torn, still wounded, but a seed of resolve had been planted. As he left that evening, suitcase in hand, he turned at the door. His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it now. "Thank you, Mother. I promise you, I'll make this right." I stood in the doorway long after he drove away, the echo of his words still ringing in my ears. For the first time, I believed he might truly find his way back. And for me, there was no greater victory than knowing my son had begun to remember who he was. The news broke like a storm no one could ignore. Gregory Brooks, once the man whose name carried weight in every New Jersey courtroom, now stood in headlines smeared with disgrace. Prominent attorney faces civil lawsuits for elder coercion. His face, once smug with power, appeared on evening broadcasts, his voice captured on my recording played again and again. His colleagues no longer called him. His clients fled. And the very bar association he once bragged about serving now hung him out to dry. I watched from my living room as the anchor read his name with a tone that left no doubt. His career was finished. He was fighting multiple civil suits, some from former clients emboldened by his fall. Others came from watchdog groups eager to make an example of him. His wealth drained as fast as his reputation, each lawsuit carving another piece off the empire he had built through intimidation. I remembered his voice in my dining room, dripping with arrogance. Courts listened to family, not widows clinging to fading power. Now those same courts were tearing him apart. Natalie fared no better. Her mask of charm collapsed the moment society turned its back on her. The charity luncheons that once welcomed her now barred her name from guest lists. The women who once admired her fashion whispered behind closed doors about her cruelty. And the family dinners that once displayed her pride now carried only shame. Andrew had left her. He could no longer live in the house where every room reeked of deceit. Natalie stayed behind, surrounded by furniture she had chosen, but now looked foreign, hostile. A cavernous apartment in Manhattan, once her trophy, now stood empty except for her rage. I know, because Andrew told me. "She sits alone, Mother," he said quietly. "She doesn't answer calls. She doesn't even turn on the lights half the time. But when she does, her eyes burn. She blames you for everything." I closed my eyes at his words, imagining her pacing those hollow rooms, her hands clenched, her voice whispering curses into the night. Defeat had not softened her. It had hardened her into something more venomous. One evening, as I returned home from the market, I found a note slipped under my door. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, deliberate. It read only, "This isn't over. Bailisa." I burned it in the fireplace, watching the flames curl the paper into ash. Her threat did not frighten me. It only reminded me of who she had always been, a woman who believed hatred was power. But hatred cannot build. It only corrodes. Gregory, stripped of his courtroom swagger, was last seen walking into hearings with no reporters chasing his comments. No cameras sought his face. His suits hung loose on him, his skin pale from sleepless nights. And yet, when confronted by journalists outside one courthouse, he still sneered, "This is nothing but a witch hunt. Margaret Collins will regret crossing me." I shook my head when I saw the footage. Even in ruin, he clung to the illusion of control. His words carried no weight anymore, but the bitterness in them made viewers recoil. People could smell the rot of arrogance refusing to die. Natalie, meanwhile, clung to anger the way drowning men cling to driftwood. She called Andrew late at night, her voice sharp, desperate. "You chose her over me. Do you realize what you've done? She'll never leave you anything. You'll end up with nothing because of her. You're a fool." Andrew told me later, his voice heavy. "She doesn't see it, Mother. She doesn't see that it's not about money. It's about dignity. She'll never understand." He was right. I thought back to Daniel's words in his letter. "They will underestimate you. Let them. The power of being unseen is stronger than the power of being feared." He had been right, too. They underestimated me, saw only an old widow, and in their arrogance, they destroyed themselves. Now the twist that remained was not their loss. It was their refusal to surrender gracefully. They had lost wealth, status, respect, but their hatred, their venom, clung tighter than ever. Gregory still spat curses in interviews. Natalie still plotted in silence. They were ghosts of their former power, yet dangerous in the way only bitterness can be, and I wanted the world to see that. Not to fear them, but to learn from them. To look at their downfall and whisper to themselves, "I will never treat my parents this way. I will never let greed eat me alive." Because in the end, Gregory and Natalie did not just lose to me. They lost to themselves. Their empire collapsed not because of one recording, but because they could not imagine a world where decency outweighed ambition. I stood at my window one night, looking out over Princeton as the leaves began to fall. Their world had burned down, yet mine remained. Not untouched, not unscarred, but standing. And I whispered into the quiet, "You have your hatred. I have my peace. I know which one lasts longer." I sat on the porch of my Princeton home, the late afternoon sun painting the roses in soft gold. Daniel had planted those roses years ago, their roots deep in the soil, their blooms stubborn against every storm. They were his gift to me, a reminder that beauty survives if it is tended with care. The world around me had shifted. Gregory was buried under lawsuits, stripped of his dignity, clinging to his bitterness like a man grasping sand. Natalie sat in her empty apartment, her eyes burning with hatred no one cared to notice anymore. Andrew was still searching for himself, but at least he was free of their shadow. The war had ended, not with grand gestures or courtroom fireworks, but with truth, cutting quietly, like a blade no one saw coming. I leaned back in the old rocking chair, my fingers brushing a rose petal. The words came softly, but they carried the weight of every battle I had endured. Money can be coveted, but dignity, no one can steal that from you. And silence, when wielded wisely, is the strongest weapon of all. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of roses. I thought of Daniel, of his letter locked in the safe. He had given me $78 million, yes, but more than that, he had given me strategy. He had taught me that strength isn't always in shouting the loudest, but in knowing when to say nothing and let others condemn themselves. Neighbors sometimes asked me if I was lonely. They saw me sitting here, a widow on her porch, sipping tea in the quiet of evening. What they did not see was the fortress built from my choices, from Daniel's foresight, from the dignity no betrayal could erase. Andrew visited more often now. Sometimes he sat beside me in silence, watching the roses. Other times he spoke softly, ashamed of his weakness, determined to rebuild my trust. I did not offer him easy forgiveness, because easy lessons are quickly forgotten, but I gave him presence, and in that presence he learned. I looked out at the street, the world moving on as though nothing had happened, yet everything had. Justice had not come in a blaze, but in a steady unraveling of lies, in arrogance meeting its own ruin. That was enough. As the sun dipped low, I whispered to myself, "Daniel, I kept quiet. Thank heavens I did. Because silence was the blade they never saw, and it cut deeper than their greed ever could." I rose, walked down the steps, and tended to the roses. The soil was cool, the thorns sharp, but the blossoms were radiant. Life, like these flowers, required patience, strength, and a refusal to let bitterness take root. The war was over. My dignity remained, and that was the victory that mattered.